In what commenced as a jovial piece of repartee on a live television broadcast, the mood shifted dramatically when Will Smith attempted a playful jab at President Ibrahim Traoré. However, instead of meeting the jest with irritation or a clever comeback, Traoré delivered a serene yet potent declaration that resonated deeply, leaving the actor transparently stirred. The exchange left the studio audience speechless and has since proliferated across the internet as a remarkable demonstration of grace, sagacity, and unvarnished truth. The studio lights cast a brilliant glare, the air humming with the energy of the evening with Celebrities Talk Show, which boasted an impressive roster of guests. On one side of the stage was Will Smith, a celebrated and cherished Hollywood figure. Opposite him, clad in an unassuming suit, sat President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, his demeanor composed and unwavering. The segment was designed for levity, a moment of congenial conversation. The host, chuckling, turned to his guest, prompting, "So, Will, have you considered a presidential run? You'd be up against this man." Will gave a good-natured laugh and, with no ill intent, remarked, "I'd bring a bit more flair to the office, at the very least. No disrespect, President Traoré, but your suit looks like the tailor went on a break mid-stitch." The audience erupted in laughter, and Traoré offered a polite smile. It was a standard, light-hearted roast, the type frequently heard on American talk shows. Yet, the energy in the room underwent a palpable change. Traoré leaned forward slightly, clasping his hands, and patiently waited for the amusement to subside. His gaze connected with Will's, then, in a tone devoid of either anger or mirth, he began to speak. It wasn't merely the content of his words that hushed the room, but the delivery and the message that followed would cause the world to take a collective breath. "I do not wear power," Traoré started, his voice soft. "I carry it." The studio fell silent. He gestured gently in Will's direction. "In my country, Burkina Faso, there are communities without light, children who trek for miles on bare feet to learn beneath the shade of trees. If my suit cost $5,000, it would be a theft from them." Will's grin vanished. Traoré went on, "You create motion pictures that inspire the globe to laughter, tears, and contemplation. I bear the burden of lives that are contingent on every choice I make, including the unspoken ones. If fashion could mend a dilapidated hospital, I would adorn myself in gold." The audience was utterly still. There was no applause, no polite tittering. Only a profound, quiet Traoré's statement filled the space, not with aggression or defensiveness, but with an honesty that was profoundly moving. Will blinked, reclining. In his seat, something had struck a chord deep within him. The exchange was no longer about a simple joke. It was about the profound reality of the man at whom the jest was aimed. In that fleeting silence, the cameras captured an unguarded moment, tears welling in Will Smith's eyes. He quickly looked away, but the internet caught it, as did the millions who would soon view the segment on every social media outlet imaginable. Backstage, once the show concluded, the atmosphere was thick with significance, not tension. Sat by himself for a time, sipping water, his thoughts evidently elsewhere. A producer cautiously approached. "Are you all right?" Will affirmed with a nod, but remained silent. The video was already circulating online. A 90-second clip titled "President Ibrahim Traoré's words leave Will Smith humbled." It surpassed 1 million views in under 2 hours, but its journey was more than viral. It was transformative. Remarked online, that wasn't a comeback. It was truth delivered with grace. Another posted, "I watched this with my 12-year-old son, and we both wept." In his dressing room, Will eventually rose and made his way down the corridor to where President Traoré was sitting, engrossed in a small book. Will drew a breath. "Mr. President," he began. Traoré looked up, a gentle smile on his face. "Will's." The voice was thick with emotion. "I needed to hear that. Thank you." The two men, one a giant of Hollywood, the other a leader from the Sahel, clasped hands. In that single act, the world witnessed something more profound than a trending clip. It witnessed respect, humility, and a connection forged between two disparate worlds on a bridge of shared truth. By the next day, the internet was ablaze. The footage of Ibrahim Traoré's composed, truth-laden response had traveled across continents. News programs replayed it. Social media influencers reacted with emotional videos, and major news organizations that seldom featured African leaders were now discussing Traoré. The phrase that trended globally was simple: when dignity spoke, the world listened. In Burkina Faso, activity in marketplaces came to a halt as small radios broadcast the exchange repeatedly. Farmers, students, and elders listened with a sense of pride, seeing their leader not as a politician, but as a patriarchal figure composed, dignified, and profoundly human. From the U.S., Will Smith shared a brief video. "I told a joke on television," he said. "He offered me wisdom. I've been in the presence of kings and icons, but this was different." He wasn't performing. He was genuinely humbled, and the public recognized it. But beneath the surface of headlines and acclaim, another. The story was quietly taking shape, one Traoré had never intended. A message more profound than television had begun to germinate in hearts around the world. He had unintentionally become a reflection, compelling people to look inward. Soon, more hearts would be moved. In a modest hospital in Ouagadougou, an 11-year-old girl named Muna was fighting leukemia. She had seen the clip of President Traoré with her mother the previous evening. Her eyes lit up. "Mama, he isn't like the others." With a trembling hand, she wrote a short note and whispered, "Can this be sent to him?" A nurse, moved by the child's sincere hope, posted a picture of the letter on Twitter, captioning it, "She has only days left, but she wants to thank her president." The letter said, "Dear President Traoré, I am very sick, but seeing you on TV made me forget my pain. You made me feel proud. You didn't yell or joke back. You just spoke like a true father. Thank you. I wish I could give you a hug." By midday, the tweet had garnered 2 million likes. Then he rose, put on his coat, and addressed his aides. "Cancel my next appointment. I need to make a phone call to a child. May I have a word with your daughter?" The room went still. The president spoke to her gently, asking about her favorite things. She giggled, her pain momentarily forgotten. Then she whispered, "Are you really the man from the TV?" "You are stronger than I am, Muna," he told her, his own voice cracking slightly. After the call, Traoré sat alone, looking out at the bustling American city. His thoughts in that small hospital room filled with immense courage. After the studio lights dimmed, the set remained unusually silent. Will Smith stood near the stage, curtain, his hands trembling as the resonance of Traoré's tranquil words echoed in his mind. Crew members averted their gaze, uncertain how to react to what had just transpired. "You meant every word, didn't you?" Will asked quietly, approaching Traoré. The president affirmed, with a nod, "I do not speak for effect." Moment of stark honesty. Traoré observed the vulnerability in Will's expression. He nodded, struggling to contain his tears. Meanwhile, outside the studio, thousands were already sharing the clip. The internet was buzzing, but what was to unfold next was not about celebrity, it was about healing. She had witnessed her son make countless people laugh and cry, but never had she seen him like this. Hold on to this moment. He hadn't cried in his mother's presence since he was a teenager, but now the tears flowed freely. Traoré's words had touched a part of him, he thought, long buried a part concerned with worth, image, and being seen for more than just his fame. He took a deep breath and, for the first time in years, opened his notes app to write, not a punchline or a script, but a letter to the man who had inadvertently reached his soul. The following morning, Will's letter appeared on his Instagram. Accompanied by a photo of Traoré standing serenely on set, it read, "President Traoré, you didn't retaliate, you didn't laugh it off, you offered me truth. In your stillness, I saw my own turbulence. In your dignity, I saw my own insecurities. You reminded me, and perhaps the world, that a man's strength is not proven by force or ostentation, but by how he bears the truth. Thank you. I am learning, and I am listening." The post went viral. Millions shared it, politicians commented. Young people were moved to tears, and parents used it as a teaching moment. In Ouagadougou, Traoré's office was flooded with letters from around the globe. Yet, one stood out. It wasn't from a celebrity or a world leader. It was from a young boy in Harlem. The last line read simply, "I want to be calm like you when people make fun of me." President Traoré closed the letter, looked at his advisors, and said, "This is no longer about what occurred on television." On the other side of the world, a 12-year-old boy named Marcus sat on his bed in Brooklyn. He had been bullied at school that day, called names, and pushed around for his worn-out shoes. She raised the volume. Marcus glanced up as Traoré's voice filled the room. The world does not need louder men. It needs quieter hearts with deeper truths. He folded the note, uncertain if he would ever mail it, but the act of writing brought him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in weeks. President Traoré sat in his modest office. It was a scanned, handwritten letter from a schoolboy named Marcus. He read it 3 times in silence, then looked out the window and said softly to an aide. Without a second thought, he requested that a call be arranged. That evening, Marcus was summoned to the school counselor's office, his heart pounding. Was he in trouble? Instead, he was passed a phone. "Hello, who's this?" A voice asked. "This is Ibrahim Traoré. I read your letter." But Traoré continued, "You possess a strength greater than many adults I have met. I want you to know that you gave me hope today." Marcus began to cry, not loudly, but with the quiet, shaking sobs of someone who has finally been seen. Day, without any press or fanfare, Will Smith landed in Ouagadougou. He wore simple attire, had no security detail, and had made no announcement. When Traoré saw him, he smiled warmly. Will laughed, then grew serious. "I came because what you said didn't just affect me, it altered me." Will handed Traoré a folded piece of paper. He said, "It begins when we tell the truth to ourselves." A small girl ran up and handed Will a flower. He knelt and smiled at her. It was not a grand stage. There was no applause. A group of young men huddled around a flickering television. Rewatching the moment, Will Smith's jest was met with Traoré's world-stopping words. One of the men, Idris, wiped a tear from his eye. "This is the first time I have seen a president speak from his soul," he said. The barber, an elder who had witnessed many leaders, nodded in agreement. It transformed. They switched off the television and sat in contemplation, not because there was nothing left to say. Embassy in Los Angeles, from Jada Pinkett Smith, she had seen the moment live, watched it again. Her letter was not formal, but deeply vulnerable. "I am not sure you comprehend the full extent of what you did not only for Will, but for the millions of men watching who have never been taught that dignity is not the same as domination. In a single moment, without raising your voice, you showed the world that calmness is not weakness, but a quiet manifestation of strength. You cannot imagine how desperately this world needed that lesson." Traoré read it by himself, then slowly folded it and placed it in his journal. He turned to his aide and remarked, "We do not require louder speeches. We require louder silence, followed by more profound actions." A strange phenomenon began to unfold. Clips of Traoré's statement were being subtitled in Mandarin, Arabic, French, Portuguese, and even Swahili, not merely because it was trending, but because it felt as if truth finally had a global voice. Universities held discussions, psychologists penned articles, and religious institutions referenced it. Even a popular late-night host, who had at first made light of the incident, went on air to apologize. "I thought it was just another awkward TV moment," he admitted, "but I see now it was history being quietly made." The event had transcended Will Smith and television. It had become a symbol, a turning point, a mirror that the world found itself unable to turn away from. 3 days after the incident, Will Smith made an unscheduled appearance on a daytime talk show in New York. There were no jokes, no script, just a man on a chair with a microphone who had been visibly changed. His voice trembled slightly. "I've made movies, I've made millions laugh, but nothing has ever stopped me in my tracks like he did." When President Traoré looked at me that night, it was as if he saw straight through the performance, not just my own, us all to maintain. After a long pause, he added, "He reminded me what it means to be a man, not through power, but through peace." By the time he finished, the studio was quiet, and a few tears were shed. That same night, Traoré's assistant hurried into his office. "Mr. President, it's a message from Will." The email was brief but potent. "I've spoken to the world with my heart, but now I need to speak with yours. I would like to visit Ouagadougou, not as an actor, but simply as a man." Traoré smiled gently. "Let him come," he instructed. "Let him see where real truth is cultivated, not in palaces, but in pain." The next morning, Will landed in Burkina Faso. There were no cameras or red carpets, only Traoré himself in a simple shirt, extending his hand. The two men embraced, a silent understanding passing between them that two lives, separated by fame and geography, had converged in a moment the world would not forget. On the sixth day, a small, impromptu press conference was held outside a youth center in Ouagadougou. Will stood next to Traoré, his voice resolute. This man did not clap back. He didn't meet fire with fire. He showed me, and all of us, what dignity is when the world is expecting pride. He paused, his eyes glistening. If you are watching this, ask yourself, when is the last time you truly listened with your heart? Traoré then stepped forward and added softly, we do not heal by ridiculing one another. We heal by recognizing the wounds we each carry. The crowd did not erupt in cheers. They stood in a moved silence. Within 24 hours, the new clip had over 40 million views. In homes, offices, and classrooms, people wept not for entertainment, but because they had witnessed a moment of purity in a fractured world. Dear reader, if this account has touched you, if any part of it brought a tear to your eye, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing your thoughts below. Not just to satisfy an algorithm, but so that more people can experience what you just have. Let us know which part resonated with you the most. Let this be a beginning, not an end.